Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Today we're going to continue our series of identifying and using wild herbs and edibles. Specifically, we're going to get into the mustard family and the rose family. And it should be pretty interesting. I think you're going to enjoy this one. But I wanted to finish up on one thing because it was brought back up this week in a rather surprising fashion. I'm not going to get into politics. I'm going to avoid that subject. Don't worry. I'm not going to say anything that should be offensive to anybody, no matter which side of the aisle you're on. But Dr. Fauci was on some show, and he was being interviewed, and someone asked him about his conflicting statements about the origins of the virus and whether or not they had funded the research in the Wuhan lab. He testified under oath before Congress that they did not fund it. And then it turned out that yes, indeed, they did fund it. Yeah, there's a good idea. How about if we spend our time and go find some deadly virus and make it more deadly, called gain of function? We have treaties against chemical weapons and biological weapons because they're blatantly and patently immoral. But for some reason, we're spending millions of dollars funding research into biological weapons. Yeah, it's bad. It's just bad. Okay, that's my opinion. And that's as far as I'm going to get as far as the politics of it. But he said this statement. He said, if you're questioning me, you're questioning science. Now, that is an incredible statement on its face, isn't it? I said a couple of weeks ago how there's so many subjects we're not even allowed to ask questions about anymore. It's what I would call the tyranny of the white coat. And this is interesting. It's a little bit of history. This is how it came about. There was a man named Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays is not only the father of modern advertising, he's the father of propaganda. His, I believe it was his uncle. I believe it was one of those inbred type situations where it might have been like a double second cousin or something like that, with Sigmund Freud. So Bernays studied not only advertising, marketing, but psychology. And he was a brilliantly sinister, evil man. He came up with campaigns that encouraged women to smoke cigarettes. See, up to that time, it was not considered polite for women to smoke. Well, he basically started the women's liberation movement. He made it a political issue of you have a right to smoke just as much as a man does. Think about how that preyed on someone's psychological weaknesses. He said to them, "You deserve this. You're being left out." Now that was sinister and brilliant on its own. He worked for companies that made soap and deodorant and toothpaste. He invented the term BO, body odor. It didn't exist before Edward Bernays. And he invented the term halitosis, bad breath. Once again, did not exist as a term before Edward Bernays. And he found that if in his advertisement he had a message from a doctor, that sold the product. He would send out letters just to random doctors and say, what do you think about this product for this condition? And some of them would write back. Some of them were paid. A lot of them were paid. And he came up with the idea 4 out of 5 doctors say, and those sold products. Now we've come to the point of where, my great grandparents didn't go to doctors. They had their babies at home. If they had a severe injury, they'd go to the hospital. If somebody got cancer, they go to the hospital. People who were not spending their lives in doctors' waiting rooms. They were not on 10,000 medicines. This commercial that comes on the radio drives me crazy. Guy called himself Big Lou. Big Lou's on meds too. It starts off diabetes, anxiety meds. Everybody's on them. Well, why is that? Why is everybody on them now? Think about that. Do these conditions always exist? Have we gotten better at treating them? No, now medical error and malpractice is the leading cause of death. And mainly that is overprescription and prescriptions of drugs that are contraindicated, killing people. But the tyranny of the white coat, if the doctor says it, you have to believe it. If the scientist says it, you have to believe it. You'll go, okay, they got a lot of education. Maybe they are experts. But when did we cede the right to think for ourselves and do our own research? And the reason this is important to an herbal podcast is because herbs are all about treating yourself, treating your own family, making your own decisions. I have worked all week on my new book that should be coming out in a couple of weeks. I've been putting in 9, 10, 12 hours of sitting in the front of the computer every day, writing and researching. The book I finished my research in yesterday was over 900 pages. Okay? I sat there in front of a computer from morning until late with a 900 and I think 36-page book doing research on herbs. That takes critical thinking. And if we fall prey to this, you can't question a doctor or science, we're going to lose everything we're fighting for so hard in terms of personal freedom, in terms of preserving herbalism. The medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry especially, wants to make what we do illegal. We cannot give in to the tyranny of the white coat. And that's all I'm going to say on that subject. Now, to more lighthearted topics. As I told you, I guess it was in last week's show, the easiest plants for a beginner to begin to identify in the wild are the mint family, the Brassicaceae family, that's the mustard family, and the rose family. You know, when we started with the buttercup family because that one has a lot of poisonous members and a lot of useful members, and I wanted to get that one out of the way first. It's also very easy to identify. So, keeping with our theme here of easy to identify plants, let's talk about the mustards and the roses. I'm not going to spend a long time on the mustard family because there are not a lot of medicinally useful herbs in the mustard family. There are a few, and I'll mention them. Mainly, this is one of your most important wild edibles. Just about anywhere you are, you can identify these basic features. 4 petals that are cross-shaped or X-shaped pattern, okay? 4 petals going out in 4 different directions like a cross or an X. Cruciferous means it looks like a cross. 4 petals, okay? 4 sepals. Sepals are the little, what would you say, they're almost somewhere between a leaf and a petal. They usually form at the base of a flower. So 4 petals, 4 sepals. 6 stamens, 4 tall stamens and 2 short stamens. It's that simple, really. 4 petals, 4 sepals, 4 tall stamens, 2 short stamens. You see that? You found a member of the mustard family. Now, what are the members of the mustard family? Well, there's most of our most common vegetables. These are your radishes, these are your mustards, these are, just about every green that you eat. I would say 90% of them at least are in the mustard family. And we see these in the wild all the time. Some of the more common ones are, shepherd's purse. Let's talk a little bit about shepherd's purse because it's one of the ones that's medicinal. Shepherd's purse. Now, this is shepherd's purse because it has a really unique seed pod. It looks like the little bag that shepherds used to carry their money in, I guess, or whatever else they were carrying in that bag. It's almost kind of heart shaped. They're up the top. The leaves almost look like a prickly lettuce or a dandelion leaf. But it's a member of the mustard family. And if you look at the flower, you're going to easily be able to identify it. Remember, four petals, four sepals, six stamens, four tall, two short. All right, so shepherd's purse is medicinally, now this is Capsella, that's the official name, is astringent and diuretic. It is especially known as a potent vasoconstrictor and coagulant. That means if you're bleeding, if you can get some shepherd's purse, you can stop the bleeding. Very important to know. The tea can be used internally or externally to stop bleeding. It is commonly used for women's mid-cycle bleeding. It may also equalize blood pressure, but it can have inconsistent effects, causing either vasodilation or hypertension. As an astringent and diuretic, Capsella is good for the urinary tract and bladder, and it stimulates phosphate recycling in the kidneys. It is given during birth to stimulate uterine contractions. It's a remedy for diarrhea. That's a powerful herb. That's an important herb. And I always warn people, I say, don't take herbs when you're pregnant unless you really, really know what you're doing. So just because it says here in Botany in a Day by Thomas J. Elpel, it's given during birth to stimulate uterine contractions doesn't mean I'm recommending it for that purpose. But it has been used by midwives and such for that purpose. Let's see, mustard. Mustard itself is a wonderful. It's actually my favorite pot herb. I absolutely love mustard greens. But it's the same plant from which we get mustard seeds to make the condiment mustard. And if you collect your own mustard seeds, and actually you can use a lot of these seeds interchangeably. I mean, you can make a mustard-like condiment from radish seeds. You can make it from probably any of the seeds in this family, and you can mix them up. You can get really creative with it because they all have different flavors. But making mustard is as simple as take the whole seeds, put them in a little vinegar, a little salt, add a little wine if you like, white wine, and soak them. That's it. That's mustard. If you grind it up, you can get a nice, paste. You can do it as fine as like a Dijon mustard or as coarse and chunky as a good German style mustard. You can throw some horseradish in there if you really want to give it a punch, a real pack. I love horseradish and mustard. And if you want that, you know, bright orange American mustard color, add a little turmeric to it. That's all it is. Mustard's a simple thing to make, and people made fortunes off mustard. I mean, it's really something we could make in our kitchen to save a little money and just as a nice hobby. It's fun to do. You can also make fermented mustards. Like I said, you're adding a little vinegar, a little wine. Well, if instead of adding a little vinegar, I mean, if you have live active vinegar, with a live active culture, that's fine. But you can add a couple of spoonfuls of plain kombucha, plain kombucha tea. It's very sour. If you've ever had kombucha that hasn't been sweetened, it is very sour. It gets more sour the more it sits there. Well, it will start that lacto fermentation on those mustard seeds, and you can get something that's really good for your gut health as well as bringing out all kinds of really interesting flavors. So keep that in mind. But also, mustard seed does have medicinal uses. You've probably heard of a mustard plaster. Well, mustard seeds essentially warm and irritate the skin if they're crushed and put on the skin. Why would you want to do that? Well, it's called a rubefacient. It's really good in chest colds. Good old home remedy. They used it in England and early America all the time. A mustard plaster to help break a fever and help break up congestion in the lungs, helps with a cough. It's diaphoretic. It brings out that sweat. Now, if you leave it on too long, it can definitely irritate the skin and cause blistering and sores. So you definitely don't want to do that. But, it's another good one to have in your medicine cabinet. Let's see, rock cress. All your cresses are in this family. Winter cress, watercress, um, bitter cress. All the cresses are in the family. Um, there's one called rocket, which is commonly eaten in Europe. Some people grow it in the garden here. That's in this family. Um, Let's see. Pepperweed. Pepperweed is a very good one. It's very peppery, as the name states. And medicinally, the freshly bruised plant has been used as a treatment for poison ivy. Now, one that's really interesting is the watercress. It's nasturtium, and it has some medicinal values. It's peppery. Watercress or nasturtium is really great in a salad or cooked, wonderful in a sandwich. But medicinally, watercress is a mild diuretic and stimulant. Prolonged use may lead to kidney problems, and consumption is not advised during pregnancy. The common garden nasturtium is in the Tropolaceae family. It actually tastes similar. They are not the same thing. So just bear that in mind. More a matter of trivia than well, I guess if you were going to use it for medicinal use, you'd want to know which one you had. Let's see, yellowcress, that's another one. Tumble mustard, pennycress. These are all in the family. So now we'll get into the roses, because the rose family has a great many medicinal herbs. So, patterns of the rose family: five sepals, five petals, usually with numerous stamens, oval, serrated leaves. But you may ask me, wait a minute, these pretty hybrid roses that I have growing here, the American Beauties and all that, they have so many petals. What do you mean it only has five petals? Actually, those roses have been bred so that the sepals look more like petals. It's sort of a trick of hybridization that makes the roses appear to have more petals, but roses have petals, and they're separate. They have numerous stamens, numerous styles, and if you think about the leaf is serrated. It's kind of oval, pointed on the end, and serrated. You will see the same pattern throughout the rose family, whether it's a rose leaf or think of a raspberry leaf. Raspberry leaf's a little more pointed and more um, defined, more dentate in its teeth. The strawberry is in the rose family. It's a little bit rounder and even a little more serrated, more deeply serrated. And if you can think of or pull up a picture of it, potentilla is in the rose family. Its leaf is more linear and serrated. But if you were to look at those leaves side by side, you'd see a very similar pattern of serration. So that's what you're looking for there. Just remember, rose family, five separate sepals, five separate petals, numerous stamens, numerous styles, serrated leaves. And if you don't know what these terms mean, just look them up real quick on the internet, because it'd be really difficult for me to explain what a stamen looks like. It's that little pointy thing sticking up from the center of a flower. So let's talk about some of the medicinal members of the rose family. And like I said, there are a bunch. All right, agrimony. Recently wrote an article on this. You can read a nice long article on agrimony on my blog, Southern Appalachian Herbs. Agrimony is astringent and diuretic, containing malic and tannic acid. It actually does a lot more than that. It's a great astringent, really good for diarrhea and skin conditions, skin complaints. Lady's mantle is another very commonly used herb. It's astringent, useful internally and externally. Strawberry. Wild strawberries, believe it or not, the leaves are fairly astringent. The ones, are more hybridized, grown in the garden variety. That leaf will still have some astringency, but when you look at whether it's strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, anything like that, where you're wanting that leaf for astringency purposes, taste the leaf. If the leaf tastes like a sour version of the fruit, and it's going to be mild. I mean, it's going to be faintly. You're not going to get a strong berry flavor from the leaf. But if the leaf tastes like a sour version of the fruit, then it has the proper astringency. When, say, blackberries or raspberries are grown in the garden in really good soil and they get watered a lot, the leaves don't have a lot of astringency. They're just kind of washed out. It's the best way I can put it. When they grow in the wild in more harsh conditions with poorer soil and just rainwater, the leaves, they're the ones who are going to have that nice astringency. Let's see, we might as well go ahead and talk actually about raspberry. This would also include salmonberry, thimbleberry. Wild raspberries contain citric and malic acid. The vegetation is mildly astringent and diuretic. Generally recommended during pregnancy. It is also mildly mucilaginous and is used for diarrhea. The wilted vegetation may produce cyanide. Okay. So, if you there's so much conflicting information out there for decades. Pregnant women have been recommended to drink raspberry leaf tea for its astringent property, for its tonifying property. According to Michael Moore, he did some research into this. A very obsessive first time mother took that advice to an incredible extreme, drinking, I think he said, a gallon of the tea a day when you recommended to have a cup or two. It may have even been more than a gallon. And anyway, it caused a miscarriage. I mean, it was just too much. When I tell you too much of anything is a bad thing, bear that one in mind. As something as innocuous and simple and relatively harmless as raspberry leaf tea can even cause you trouble if you drink it by the gallon. And I think, if I remember correctly, she was having more than a gallon of that tea. And, really, another example of too much of anything is bad for you. Drinking too much of any liquid is bad for you. You can actually kill yourself by drinking too much water. So bear that in mind. Um, but when he said the wilted vegetation may produce cyanide, you want fresh leaves, freshly dried leaves. Also bear that in mind. So what else is in this family? Avens, it's also called geum. It has tannic acid and bitter, volatile oils. Pink root, this one actually has pink sap, which is interesting. But a tea of the root is taken as a tonic. Cinquefoil, cinquefoil is a really good potentilla. You may know it as potentilla. All potentillas are astringent. The root contains up to 20% tannin. Some bitter principles are also present. The reason why Michael Moore always called these yarfas yet another rose family astringent. Every one of these is going to be listed as astringent. Roses themselves, obviously, rose hips, we've talked about that before, very high in vitamin C, good for colds. The leaves and petals all have their uses. You can make rose water, you can make eye washes out of rose petals, you can make astringent teas. Roses are just great if you have a nice rose bush growing in your yard. A wild rose is what I prefer, but you can do a tea rose. Just don't do the hybrid roses. I talked about this on my episode on medicinal flowers. The plant's own immune system has been bred out of it. That's why you always have to spray them. They get so diseased so easily. They're so susceptible to insects. When the plant can't keep itself healthy, it's not going to help keep you healthy. But say diarrhea, sore throat, anything you might want a nice astringent tea for. A rose bush in your yard is excellent first aid. Burnet, tea of the root, is highly astringent, used for diarrhea, hemorrhaging, and varicose veins. Yeah, like I said, think of all the uses for an astringent. It helps with the bleeding, it's going to shrink that tissue. It helps with the sore throat, it's going to shrink that tissue. Varicose veins, that's where the tissue of the vein has gotten boggy. It'll help shrink that tissue. There's so many things that astringents are used for, even a sunburn. These made into a nice soak help tone and take the inflammation out of sunburned skin. Wonderful first aid for that. And that's the reason some of them are also recommended for poison ivy and other rashes. Let's see. Subcategory of the rose family is spirea. Spirea, I guess you would call it. Includes meadowsweet. Meadowsweet is astringent, diuretic, contains methyl salicylate, similar to aspirin or willow. That makes it especially good for arthritis, rheumatism, urinary tract infections. Meadowsweet, my co-author, Jolanta Whitted, recommends meadowsweet and willow as an alternative to aspirin. She says it's easier on the stomach. It's one of her go-to first aid remedies. And I think it probably is more used in Europe, but it's one everyone should be using because meadowsweet is a lot better for you than commercially produced aspirin. It just is. But it's also, you need to be careful if you have hemophilia, if you have a bleeding condition, if you're on blood thinners, you need to stay away from the willows and the meadowsweet just the same way as you need to be careful about taking aspirin. Other subcategories of the rose family: plums, prunus, the entire prunus genus. That includes cherries and plums. Choke cherries. We've talked before about how cherry bark is so good for a cough. Another one you may not think of when you look at an apple tree is in the rose family. If you look at the flowers of an apple, five petals, five sepals, lots of little stamens. It's just basically a great big rose bush. You want to think about it that way. Crab apples tend to be the more medicinal of the apples, but hawthorn is also in this family. I mean, hawthorn has so many properties. Hawthorn is a wonderful heart tonic. Hawthorn has an antiarrhythmic effect. Medicinally, the leaves, flowers, and fruit are rich in flavonoids that especially beneficial to the heart. Hawthorn is used to normalize arrhythmia, high or low blood pressure, and to reduce blood clots. It makes the blood vessels more flexible, reducing vascular resistance so that the heart doesn't have to pump so hard. Now that is an important herb. If you only use one herb out of the rose family, you probably want to use the hawthorn. Serviceberry, that's in the same family. That's more of an edible, but the leaves and bark are astringent. Cotton Easter, it originally came from Russia. You might see it as an ornamental. Um, Sorbus, mountain ash. Now, we get a lot of these up where I live. Most people don't even know what they are, but I mean, I remember driving up from between North Carolina, going up to Virginia, up toward Blacksburg, and mountain ash was just everywhere. You could see the berries. I mean, it was that time of year, and it was just like, wow. If I could get out of the car right here, and I was in a hurry, I couldn't stop, but if I could have gotten out right there, I could have picked them by the 5-gallon bucket full. They're sour. They sweeten with a frost, and it was absolutely, we had a frost, and they were ready to go. But one of the sugars found in the berries is given intravenously for cases of glaucoma to reduce pressure on the eyeball. Now, how interesting is that? But that's not one you're going to use yourself, obviously. We don't do anything intravenously in herbal medicine. But the vegetation is astringent and diuretic and contains those small amounts of cyanide. And don't freak out when I say that. That's the same thing as black cherry bark. Your body handles it just fine, and it actually is a sedative, a calming, and an antispasmodic. Now, of course, too much cyanide will kill you. So always bear such as that in mind. Too much of anything is a bad thing. So I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, pears in the same family, quince, loquat, and all these can be used as rose family astringents. And I'll probably have a lot more information on the apples and the quinces and all that, because that's part of the subject of the book I've been working on. So, y'all, I think that about wraps it up for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. You'd be amazed all the plants that really are in the rose family, but I just covered the ones that you're going to identify most readily. And, that gives you a lot of new herbs to go out and explore and learn about this week. Keep your eyes open for any of these. Get some pictures, look them up, maybe make yourself some little flashcards or, get a good field guide and get out there and enjoy it. I mean, the mustards are delicious. Most of the members of the rose family are delicious, and so many of these are medicinal as well as being edible. So it's, June, and it's just a wonderful time to be outside, and I hope I've given you some good, useful information. I know it, boy, when I learned this stuff, it opened up a whole new world for me. And well, it's become my life's passion, really. So, y'all, have a great week, and I'll see you next time. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.